Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am not at my normal digs right now, but I wanted to do a video because this actually was last week, but somebody asked a question which was in one of the Kickstarter or publisher forums like, hey, how do I fulfill spare parts? Like, do I just open a copy of extra copies of my games and pick out pieces? And I was reading the comments and lots of people were like, yeah, you just have to open it up. That's the only way to get spare parts. And it like blew my mind. It blew my mind because when you print from a manufacturer, you can just they should ship you spare parts. You should have boxes of spare parts. I have so many spare parts from all these print runs. I don't even know what to do with them anymore. Apparently, actually, you can send them to the game crafter as an option. But so, it occurred to me that it might be beneficial to do some like tips and tricks for working with manufacturers about things that I think are maybe obvious but aren't or people don't know. And I guess it turns out that Pencil First Games has made a lot of products, right? Like we're a small publisher, but we've been around for a while and I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15 products over the years. There are huge USopoly, Yellow, Renegade, Asmodee. There are companies that have printed way more product than I have. But I don't know, maybe they're not making videos like this. So, for a historic perspective, I used Panda Games Manufacturing first, and had a really great experience with them. But ultimately, for some future products, we were looking for a little bit of a cheaper solution, and then I started working with Watts Games Manufacturing, and I've been working with Watts since. So the scope of experience is limited to those groups, but hopefully some of this information still applies. What I will say is, holy moly, it's competitive. There are tons and tons of manufacturers that are going to try to get you to work with them, use them, give them money, all of those things. And so to that end, I think it's a buyer's market in the context of there are a lot of options, a lot of people vying for you. So, but first and foremost, like any international partner, whether it's a localization, publisher, printer, whatever, do not work with any partner that you can't have a regional reference from, right? First and foremost, somebody says, hey, work with us. Cool. Send me a quote. Cool. You look great. Cool. Can you please name somebody in the United States who's worked with you before who I can use as a reference? Maybe you're in France. Can you name somebody in France? There is no reason whatsoever to work with a partner who you can't get a reference check from. It is a small industry. You can get information and talk to anybody. There's so many reasons to do it. It's just, hey, did they communicate promptly? Were they timely? Was there any manufacturing issues? Blah, 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 blah. It is a small step, but have a phone call with a partner who's worked with that company. Just get to know them a little bit, and it'll save your butt. I'm sure it will. But okay, so you have a partner you're working with. Another super important bit, like I think it's obvious, but perhaps it's not. Build a relationship with your printer. Maybe you're not going to end up printing a ton of games. Maybe you're going to price around and bounce around, but it is such a fundamental building block for you and your company. If this is for board game makers, right? It is such a fundamental building block. It is a company that you are going to want to be interacting with regularly. So many things your timeliness are going to be dependent. The quality, dealing with other issues. It's so important. It is so important that you want to build a relationship. I've taken quotes with other printers over the years. Everyone wants games. But the relationship that I've developed over times with Watts is invaluable, and I might ultimately consider somebody else, but boy, there's a lot of value there. So what does that mean? That means talk to them, set up calls, right? You're dealing with somebody over email. You want a rep who you're talking to and talking with regularly. If they keep bouncing you around different people, I wouldn't use them. Make sure, and it doesn't have to be always like a great, like somebody who speaks perfect English or in the case of Panda Games, they sort of have a rep group that's separate from the factory. You can work directly with the factory, but just have somebody you're working with back and forth. And if they can't understand them in email, probably not a good partner. You need to be able to talk about really fine details, but you want to be able to talk with them regularly. You should do it via email and have really regular email interactions, and they should be responsive. But you should also try to set up Skype calls once a month during your production run. Just have face-to-face time. Get to know them. If you're going to cons, and a lot of folks aren't right now, but if you are and they have reps at conventions, spend time with them. Have lunch, have coffee. They may want to buy you coffee or buy them coffee. But get to know them. I have actually, after a print run, ordered a small thank you gift from a Chinese Amazon, whatever, to ship to the partner who was doing it, because I really appreciated the work they were doing. And it was a gesture, right? it was like a desk organizer or something, but it wasn't expensive. But it is such an important partner. It is such an amazingly important partner. If you are a publisher, if you're going to be publishing all the time, you want to have a good relationship. You want them to like you. You want them to respect you. You want them to look at you as a good partner. Never hurts if you're able to also bring in new work, bring new clients. It also adds on to your value. But the relationship piece is important. And certainly from my experience, it has been. So I really think that's an important starting point. All right. And then let's get some more tips and tricks. When you're going to get a lot of quotes, some from different groups. You can get quotes. You can cross compare quotes. Again, I work with Watts all the time, but I always think it's healthy to look at other quotes, see how they're comparing, see if it's gone up or gone down. When you get a quote, one thing that you need to understand is, that is a lock-in. And so if you don't sign it, you're not locked in. But if you don't sign it and you're not locked in, and you wait 6 months or after your Kickstarter's gone by, and then you take the quote, don't be surprised if it's changed, because they're not obligated to keep it. Some quotes may say good for this amount of time or that amount of time, but at the end of the day, they don't care. No one's going to print, no one's going to lose money because of something they said to you 9 months ago, right? So I'm not espousing that folks sign contracts too early. I think it's really important to have flexibility. Kickstarters change, numbers changes. I think in that model it's important. But I get early quotes and I get updated quotes. I don't sign a quote that I got 6 months before Kickstarter. Then I'll just wait. And there's some risk there, but it's important to understand the risk. It's important to understand that things change. While shipping's changing, but the price of paper right now has gone up significantly. The price of 3/4 inch plywood has also changed, or pine, or whatever. Things are getting expensive. That will impact the cost to you, and you need to sort of be ready for it. But so you're going to have this quote. You can cross compare. Now, certain companies will not provide you line by line breakdown of what those costs are out of the gate. They'll be like, hey, we'll do this for this much. I don't like that. Panda doesn't tend to do that, and they're top tier, right? So it's not necessarily top tier, bottom tier. But to me, as a producer, as a publisher, I like to then know the cost of all the different bits in the game, because when I'm thinking about weight or cost or stretch goals, oh, that's expensive. Oh, what happens if I take that item and I do prints on both sides versus one side? Oh, that's a 10-cent difference per component. Oh, I'm not going to do that. You can get around it by constantly asking for new quotes with changes. You can get around it, but I think that it's certainly you should ask. You shouldn't be offended. This, I guess part of these tips are don't be afraid to ask, demand, look for answers. Hey, can you break that out for me? Oh, we don't usually do that. Well, if you can't break it down for me, I want to look at other quotes, but can you please break it down for me? Or, hey, I'm not going to ask you to break down the entire thing, but can you break down these components for me to understand? Or can you just explain it to me? Not in the quote, but in an email. Understanding your quote's really important. Also, hey, newsflash, most of these manufacturers don't actually make everything. If you didn't know it, most factories don't produce everything. Dice, wood, paper, plastic inserts, a lot of factories are they're the paper, the punch board, and the box, and then they source the other things. bigger factories with bigger businesses are start saying, oh, we have so much business, we're going to start doing our own meeples, or we're going to start doing that. And some of the really large guys have done that. But generally speaking, they go to the dice guys, they go to the wood guys, and there's like a bunch of factories, and they all just source from each other as they get stuff. It's really important to know. Is it going to have any major impact? Perhaps not, but you should know where the different pieces are coming from and at least be comfortable to ask. Also, sometimes they'll say, you can't get this. Oh, we don't do that. Be like, well, here's other games that do it. Can you look and see if you can find the factory that did this and then order from them? Or maybe I'll order it for you. So there are ways to solve around that. And it's important because also, sometimes with dice, sometimes with different components, they may say, oh, we can't do that. What they mean is the sorcerer we're currently using doesn't have that thing you want. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So it takes a little legwork, little discussions, but you can get there when you get there. And a lot of times when they say something like, oh, we have everything ready, but we're waiting on the dice, they don't mean from their factory. They mean from the other guys who are sending them the dice to send to you, right? So you pick your partner, you're building a relationship, you're getting your quotes, you prints, and when they're like, give us the files. So I'm not gonna in this video break down how to lay out your files and set them all up. Maybe that's another video. Panda does have a public guide that does a really good job of laying this out, but knowing about Bleed, working with graphic design, etc. But one of the things that is really important, I'll just stress, is when you're laying out your components, be very organized, have them in folders, like the die cuts, the different PDFs, all that you're putting together. But like if you have like meeples or other components, having design sheets with the measurements, like redundant information, if it's the same, is good, right? Like here we get the quote, but I'm also going to say here's what we want from the measurement perspective. I like to provide that information, getting Pantone numbers, really making it clear. That'll ensure that you get the result you want, and you can always see if there's any confusions or need any questions. So you pass that information, and then you're going to get a couple things. So the first thing you're going to get is a digital proof or an e-proof. It's a bunch of files that are laid out for your printer. So it's like they take your strip of like, here are the PDFs, and it's in like a big sheet of paper as if they were going to print, like 8 cards by 6, by 10 cards, like a whole bunch. And there used to be this whole thing about like, oh, there's a cost break at 54 cards, and if you go to 56, a little. It has to do with like, oh, there's a little run on of cards. And when you see your sheet, you can see it. Sometimes, actually, if you want to see stuff like that, like the Game Crafter's pretty good at like teaching you like, hey, this thing fits 8. If you give me 9, you're going to get 8 and 1 plus 7 blanks or whatever. And so 1 plus 8 blanks. Right. So like getting a feel for that, but the e-proof coming across will help you out. And sometimes like what we used to do when I saw that, I wouldn't change the game, but maybe I would. It's a fun way to tuck in free marketing because like it shouldn't, in those cases, it doesn't typically change your price. If you're like, oh, those 3 blanks, can I put like little fun cards about ads for my other games or promos for the people who worked on it or whatever. So you are, so they're going to give you the e-proof, and, then from that e-proof, you'll approve it. And then the next thing that'll happen, typically, is they'll send you 2 things. They'll send you a print proof, which is like, it'll come in a tube and you like lay it all out and it's printed across the paper. And they'll send you a white box sample, which is like everything. It's like the cards without the print on it, the box, perhaps the insert if it's a paper insert. Usually it wouldn't be there if it's a plastic, but it depends on how you're pushing them. But it's sort of like these colors and things are going to be on that. Now, there are some other things that can happen. So one of the things is, and I know Panda does this, and I forget the name of it, but they do like a homemade one where they like manually print the art onto the sample of the white box sample. So it's not like gone through proper manufacturing. It's not straight from the line, but it does approximate how your pieces and components put together and fit and how they're sided. So I think those are pretty useful if you've never done production before, because it gives you this visual guide for how things are coming together. The other thing you can ask is for a print sample. They're more expensive. You're typically going to have to pay a lot for them, but that's like a quick off the line print. A lot of people aren't going to be going for that. I want to actually talk about that step more, but I'm going to back up for one more second on pricing. Couple things to note. Companies will say we only do 1,000 for the minimum, 1,500 for the minimum. Everyone wants business. You can have any conversation you want. You can say, hey, if I went like this, could I do this? If I only had 900, would you do 900? Like, don't feel you are the client. Like don't feel bad asking and looking for this information. So don't feel restricted. Like it has to be 1,500, it has to be 1,000. There's a lot of things you can work in there. Another thing that will often be the case is, this is more advanced if you're doing multiple games at the same time, or localization copies. They'll say, well, all the localization is, since we have to do these as separate prints, you can't combine the numbers, right? There's truth to that, but that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities. You can say, okay, hey, look, I get it, but great example with Skull Hollow. Hey, the Meeples don't have any localization on them. You're going to go to the Meeple guys and you're going to say, hey guys, I need 8,000, 5,000, 3,000 of these Meeples. Just 8,000, and then we're going to split them between the different localization copies. So charge me as if I know you just paid 9,000. Oh, I should use an exact number, but let's just say there were 5,000 total printed in English for 3,000 plus 2 other languages, 1,000, right? I know you're just going to ask for 5,000, so you should charge me like you just bought 5,000, not like you bought 3,000, you bought 1,000, you bought 1,000, because that's a load of, that's not true. And if you don't have a good relationship, they'll just say we can't do anything. If you have a good relationship, they'll say, oh, okay, sure, I see what you're saying, yeah. All this is all different text, but this is that. Or maybe you're like, hey, look, all these things are using the same type of paper. We're going to get a big paper order in, and then I understand we have to do this, but maybe there's some discounting there. Can you help me? Are there any options? What do you know? For those price sensitive out there, hint or trick, many printers, not all, but some, will give you a discount on your print run if you put their logo on the back of the box. Sure, representing the factory and saving some money. That can be fun. Ask them if they're interested. Maybe they don't do it, but maybe you could suggest it to them. I mean, there's no reason not to think about that. So again, like your first time through, you're working with Panda, you're getting the white glove treatment. You're like, I don't want to get something wrong, and they're making sure I get something wrong. Great. But then as you're like trying to like get that margin and get, do a little bit better. And that's when some of this comes in. So that's another thing. So we were talking about the eProof, then the white box, and then this sort of mixed media version of it. Over the years, I've started doing something very different, which Watts has accommodated. I can't speak to any printer, but I certainly think it's worth asking. I used to, so for the Skull Hollow Kickstarter, I really needed Meeple Tests because I wanted to make the Meeples the way I wanted to make sure they were great and they didn't break and they weren't brittle. So I talked to the printer and I said, hey, would you be willing to like do these tests now? Like I want to get these things. And we got it right and said, okay, cool, we got it right. Could I get 20 bags of the Skull Hollow Meeples from this test run? And they said, yeah, and they charged me for it, and it wasn't as cheap as a big, but it wasn't outrageous. So when I did that, when I had my Skull Hollow reviewer box, it had what was basically the actual Meeples. We ended up boosting their size a little bit because of stretch goals, but as far as like the reviewers playing with it, they got, full final quality Meeples. And then what I did is I got boxes from like Board Game Maker or whatever it was. They do really nice boxes. The Game Crafter hasn't. Their boxes are okay, but they haven't. Maybe they've gotten better over the years. But I wanted nicer boxes, so I ordered those boxes, not as cheap. And then actually the rest I printed through the Game Crafter. So I like sourced these different parts, built it together, put it out. So what I've started to do is I now ask printer and say, hey, I'm getting together my files, I'm putting everything together. I'd like to do print samples, actual full print samples for reviewers. So I'm gonna ask you to manufacture 20 copies, and we'll have the cards in there. Well, this maybe I don't have the insert yet, or I don't have this, but actually have it prepared at the factory. And they're like, whoa, that's not 1,000 copies. That's not 1,500 copies. That's gonna cost you. And you're like, all right, well, how much is it gonna cost you? And then when you look at it, actually, it doesn't cost much more than making it all, it's different for, if it's a single deck of cards, it's different, but it doesn't cost much more than doing the Game Crafter thing and building the box. And like, if you add up all those other costs, you end up saying, oh, you just want $40 for a print sample or $20 for each print sample? Like, actually, that's about what I'm paying the Game Crafter for. So on one hand, the quality is really nice, but that's actually not even the value for me. The value here, and again, does your printer do this? I don't know. I don't know that Watts did that originally where we did it, but I talked to them. I had a relationship. I engaged with them, and I paid for it. It wasn't a courtesy, but like what they think is like an outrageous price to pay for them to do it is expensive, but not outrageous compared to what you're doing anyway, unless you're like hand making them on your own. But even if you're going to Kinko's, right, like it adds up. But so here's the amazing value is you get this version of the game that maybe doesn't have all the cards, maybe is missing a few things, maybe there's no insert, but is really the very close approximation of what you're going to get. And you had to do this, you had to properly set up the files for manufacturing. So you get this version that's not perfect, there's typos in the rules, but allows you to really understand what your product actually looks like, final, and then you catch things. Oh, I don't really like how that we laid those cards out that way. Or, oh, actually, when they printed it, I have cards that are like, for each player, but they did them rather than being player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, it was like card 1, player 1, card 1, player 2, card away, in a way like, and it just wasn't, and then I had to open it up, deal them out, reshuffle them, and that sort of sucked. I don't want that. In the Tory, 100 Tory, there was we had a little square where we put the two meeples, and the opposite the square were the tiles, which when it was flat was fine, but when you tilted it up with the print direction, the tile weight sort of crushed downwards on the square. And like, what's the solution? The solution was the directional side, where like moving it to flipping it over, so that if you stack the box upside down, it puts some weight in the wrong way. But like when you stack it normally, it doesn't. And like those are things that would have gone to release had I not seen it. There's still things you're gonna miss. I still missed in Herbaceous Sprouts. We had two cards alternated, these info cards, and I looked at all one side, I flipped them over, I looked at all the other side, and I missed it. So you could, you're always going to make a mistake. But so these are important things to be thinking about. Also with your the print proof and the white box, and even that other sample, that doesn't necessarily, like, you'll get a standard print and they'll give you linen cards, but not necessarily a print on linen card sometimes, which can be a little bit different. Like there's a lot of subtleties in there, and anytime you try a new component or anything. So that's all important steps here. So I've really, it's not free, but I found the amount of and I think it looks great when you're doing videos and media. Like it's a really nice version of the game for taking pictures of and stuff like that. So got your partner, quotes, working through pricing, working through the printing process and going through. And so now they're doing your print run and you're like crossing your fingers. They give you the first off the box sample, which is your turn to check. Basically, usually it means they've got all the stuff, everything's ready to go. They're not closing and sealing until you do a review of the simple one. My only big, do the slow review. It's actually true at the print proof. Get a pen out, have a pad of paper, take the time to look at every card. Read every sentence. It's easy to rush. It's so easy to be like, that looks fine, whatever. Take the time. Take it slow. You want to catch it. You don't want to miss it. It's a pain when you miss it. And it's really easy to be like, oh, this looks great. I'm so happy. Do it slow. Do it slow a second time. But you review that. Hey, we're all ready. So a couple other things. One is most factories or many factories are willing to help coordinate freight shipping. They don't necessarily want to do anything too complicated, but they have lots of partners and they can do a EU, UK shipment and they can do a US shipment, whatever. So that's an opportunity to price check. I might do another video on freight, but you don't have to use the factory freight person. Go with other companies. See, sometimes you can be printing with another person and you can ship out together. These are all opportunities to take a moment and be like, what do I want to do? What are my options? How am I going to go about it? You can also have people pick up from the factory. This is very common. You can have a factory hold for a little while. I didn't realize it at first, and they're not again, this isn't like they like doing it, but sometimes you're like, I have another print, and you just wait 2 weeks and then we'll ship them together. Sure. They have a lot of space, right? They might give you problems at different times, but just again, generally speaking, build that relationship so you can have those conversations so they know about your other products, so they're involved, right? So let's talk about what started this video, and it's a long one, I guess. But what the other thing is, okay, so they're shipping you your stuff. They're going to ask you for your carton mark. Hey, it's the thing that's printed on the outside of the cardboard box things get shipped in. Oh, a couple things. One, you can ask for their recommendation of what they're going to do, but you get to decide how the carton works if you want to. You can say, I don't want this to be 12 in a box. I want this to be 4 in a box. I want this to be 6 in a box. It's really nuanced. I wouldn't mess with that unless you really know what you're doing. But if you're I want to do this deal that's this, maybe it's easier to do it that way. You're going to have the carton mark. You want your logo on it. I put the cover of the game on the carton mark. In addition to my logo and the information, because I got a garage with boxes and I want to just look over the beam. What's that? Oh, it's herbaceous sprouts. Okay. Think about what it'd be like for you to have to go through it all. So you have the carton mark. And if you don't know what to do, say, can you give me an example of a carton mark, right? Or go to your local game store and be like, hey, can I see your boxes? Go to the back and just take a bunch of pictures. So there's that. You ask up front, but all printers are going to say, we guarantee only, there's always going to be failures, but you won't have more than 1% of products with issues. If, in addition to that, manufacturers will, and ask them, get this up front if you want to, give you spare parts. It's boxes of I don't know, 20, it depends on the size of your print run, but 20, 30 games worth of dice, of meeples, of cards. And they're not all together. They're just this is the cards, this is the rules, and somebody has a problem, something's missing, you open that thing, you take the one thing out and you use it. What you won't get, and you won't get boxes. And you won't get boxes because, one, they're gigantic to ship because you're shipping formed boxes. But I also think it's because technically, I guess, if you sent me the box and you sent me everything that goes in the box, I could make my own version and get an extra copy. But you can request them. They might give you a hard time, but if you're I just want 10, I just want 20, the biggest headache, biggest hassle, biggest annoying thing is somebody who's a damaged box and wants a box replacement. Because that's when you're I guess I have to take a finished game, remove the box, or resend, or refund. The best way to handle damaged boxes is ship appropriately. Bubble wrap, good shipping, packing peanuts, whatever. Save yourself that headache by properly shipping. But boxes are a pain. The other thing is sometimes there are problems. So for Skull Hollow, everything's going well. I did the proof, and then suddenly I get some reports of rule books that are missing pages. And mine wasn't, and I looked at 3 more games and they weren't, and I talked to other people and they weren't, but I was getting emails. And I reached out to Watson, what's going on? We're getting this, what happened? Look on your end. I'm getting more reports. And so what they came back and they said is hey, we figured it out. It was from this, this part of the line. It was one guy for one shift or whatever, and it amounts to about 80 rule books. And I was well, okay, I don't know how many complaints I'm going to get. but they did a couple things. One, we looked. They sent me additional rule books, and essentially a credit towards future games for like other problems, because it was like beyond the normal, and they made a mistake. But I was working with them to figure it out, and also for my sanity to understand the damage. Since then, it's proved about true. Every once in a while, I get a note, but like I didn't know which boxes it was. But I have like a bonus stack of rule books. Somebody does it. Not cheap to send a rule book because you don't want it to bend. But anyway, this is where have relationships talks. Treat them like the person making the product is such an important part of your process. If you're using a factory in the U.S. or in Europe, and you can go and visit, and spend time, or build that relationship. I can't recommend that more. So that's how you get your samples, and then you shouldn't be opening up boxes. Now, sometimes I do. So typically, I have a damaged thing already, and I'll just leave that. It's nice to have a box because you put it on near you, and you just open it up and pull it out. Also, you can split spare parts and do some wacky things if you want to have a spare parts going to Europe and a spare parts going over here to ship it. Nothing sucks more than a broken meeple or a missing die or a little thing to Romania or to, I don't know, even Australia or Paraguay. I'm just naming far off. But you're like, oh, I'm going to send this person one blue little meeple bone, wooden bone here thing, and it's going to cost me $18, right? That's when it sucks. But if you've distributed it, you can get around that. Also, depending on your partner, you can ask them just to crack open a box. If you don't have a specific problem, it's not the end of the world. Typically, either something went wrong and you're getting tons of reports of this issue, or something's not going wrong, it's that 1%, and then it's like, oh, they got a deck with this card missing. That meeple was broken. They were missing a die. Then it's that kind of thing. I think that covers it. I had another video about manufacturing, but I was just trying to call out things that I think are now obvious, but maybe maybe aren't, and maybe you could do it. But really, build a bond, build a relationship, work with the partner, get to know them, let them know your business. That to me is, and even I don't work with Panda, but when I did, I did the same thing, and grow together, right? Because maybe you're doing a small print run, but then your next one's bigger. No one knows who's going to have the next monster game, right? And if you're the manufacturer that out of the blue is the ones who took on Gloomhaven, which might be Panda, I don't know, but hey, that's a big deal. Okay, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks. Bye.
Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks. Bye.